Ana Lucia, I will give you the challenge to cheer this up before we finish. Ana Lucia Jaramillo is a legal researcher and consultant working in the field of innovation procurement at Corvers Procurement Services. She has been engaged in the actions of the European Assistance for Innovation Procurement EAFIP Initiative since 2015 until the present, including the drafting of the EAFIP-toolkit and assistance provided to several ICT projects across Europe. She holds a master's degree in international and European law from the University of Amsterdam and Juris Doctor degree from the Pontifical Catholic University of Ecuador. She will be presenting a very interesting topic, complementary, of course, to the previous ones, on value engineering in public procurement. Ana Lucia.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me well? Yes, I have a big challenge now after all these great presentations to keep you awake without a coffee break, but I will do my best. So I will have my presentation there. Yes, thank you very much. So again, my name is Ana Lucia Jaramillo. I am part of the legal team of Corvers Procurement Services. This is a legal consultancy firm based in the Netherlands, and we are the contractor for the European Assistance for Innovation Procurement, an initiative of the European Commission. And today I'm going to talk about a technique that is not a new technique, but is a technique that has already some history behind, and we'll look into that. And it's a technique that allows for innovative solutions, innovation and savings within the term of a contract. And so I will explore what value engineering is applied to public procurement of innovative solutions in the EU legal framework. We can pass one.
You have the pointer.
Oh, I have the pointer here. Yeah, thank you. Sorry for that. Okay, so here, so we will explore value engineering, and for this purpose, I will focus on 4 main points. I will provide a backdrop of on the cycle of innovation and the taxonomy of innovation procurement based on the EAFIP methodology, and the conditions to apply value engineering in public procurement of innovative solutions. I will define the fundamentals of the value engineering technique, looking at its history and the advantages that it has, that it shows in many different cases, and explain the application of value engineering within the EU legal framework, showing also case studies of the use of value engineering change proposal examples of clauses. So, okay, first I will go through an introduction to innovation procurement, then I will have a definition and the history of value engineering. I will talk about the value engineering change proposals and the case studies that I promised you. Okay, so first of all, I would like to know if you are familiar with the value engineering technique. So you can vote, you can tell me yes, no, not sure, but you would like to learn more about it. So please go ahead and vote. I can pass it. Okay, not sure. Okay. Okay, so then it's good because it's kind of a new field for you. So I would like to do my best in order to enlighten and illustrate this. So let's go to the first part of this presentation. So, okay, we're going to see the innovation cycle and the taxonomy innovation procurement, the EAFIP methodology that has a step-by-step approach, and then how to use value engineering in PPI. Okay, so first of all, let's see, you probably know, but let's just have a little bit of background what innovation procurement means. So this is when public buyers acquire the development or the deployment of pioneering innovative solutions to address a specific mid to long-term public sector needs. And here the point of this mid to long term, today we have been talking also about in other presentations about that there is a long process when you do a PCP. When we talk about innovation, we talk about future, and we talk about preparing well for future needs and to tackle those future needs. So here you've probably seen this. We have in the taxonomy innovation procurement, we have public pre-commercial procurement, that is the procurement of research and development services when there are no solutions available in the market, and then public procurement of innovative solutions when there is already the solutions are closer to the market or in small volumes. So we have talking about the deployment of commercial volumes of end products via, the wide diffusion of newly developed solutions. So we are going to focus today more into how value engineering is applied to the public procurement of innovative solutions. Okay, so what is innovation? Just to refresh ourselves, and the directive of 2014 defined innovation, and it means the implementation of a new or significantly improved product, service, or process. So we're looking at that. So how to improve not only a product, but a service, but a process. So, and how can we use value engineering to do that? So here we are going to look at the innovation cycle and the taxonomy of innovation procurement. Here you see the technology readiness levels and how they relate to the both the instruments, pre-commercial procurement and public procurement of innovative solutions. We know that we have at first a product idea driven by curiosity, then the solution design, the prototype, and then the first test products and the commercial end products. These relate to these technology readiness levels initially developed by the NASA in the United States. And we see, for example, that when we look at the prior art analysis and we look at the technology readiness levels, we see that if we find a lot of publications, perhaps the solution is not yet developed. When we look at patents, we see that we have at a higher technology readiness levels, and when we find standards already, products and services, we know that we are higher technology readiness levels, that it means that there are more commercial end products. So we can apply, instead of pre-commercial procurement, public procurement of innovative solutions to acquire perhaps as a launching customer, for example, of new solutions, of new commercialized products or services. So here, just to give us a background of what is innovation procurement, pre-commercial procurement, public procurement of innovative solutions, and how can we address these looking at the technology readiness levels. So here, let's now take a look at the EAFIP methodology. The European Assistance for Innovation Procurement has developed also a toolkit that is available for you. It's a step-by-step guidance. And we have in this EAFIP methodology 5 main steps in innovation procurement. And that is the needs analysis, the prior art analysis to understand what is the state of the art, then the analysis of standards, that we had a very good presentation just before me about the standards, about understanding what is the degree of consensus on the certain technologies. Then the open market consultation to challenge the findings that we have obtained from these first 3 steps, the needs analysis, prior art, and standards. So we engage with the market, we challenge the findings, and then we go into the value calculations to decide on which trajectory to go, whether pre-commercial procurement, whether it is a public procurement of innovative solution, whether it is just buying a commercial off-the-shelf products. So value engineering can be used as a method for the needs analysis. It can also be used as a method for the value calculations and the alternative comparison of possibilities. So this is the full-blown EAFIP methodology. We have looked into the 5 main steps, and here we have all the steps until actually after the market consultation, the development of the business case, the procurement strategy. And in the procurement strategy, we can decide whether we also use value engineering clauses in our procurement. We announce them since the open market consultation in the contract notice. And in the contract management is going to be really important how we monitor this and how we actually have measures for addressing the value engineering clauses in a contract. So here, I said again, as a need analysis technique, it can work as a condition, as a clause in a contract. We're going to focus on that, on how to use value engineering clauses in the public contracts. And then, of course, value engineering is used to evaluate the results and the improvements. And we have this cycle of improvement, looking at the KPIs, the benchmarks, and then how to improve. We will see a graphic about this later. Okay, so when and how to use value engineering in innovation procurement. So we're gonna especially look into value engineering applied as a special condition relating to the performance of a contract. So value engineering clauses that incentive innovation and the sharing of savings as a benefit and risk sharing with the contracting authority and the contractor. And in this case, we need to look into some requirements of compliance, that is, compliance with the principles of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, that is transparency, equal treatment, non-discrimination, proportionality. That means that it is also good as a technique to already inform or already explore in the market consultation whether this technique with the setup of the contract, it is something that the suppliers are willing to accept, willing to introduce, or willing to perform during the contract. And also another very important thing when applying the value engineering in innovation procurement is avoid substantial modifications of the contract. So modifications are possible, and we will see how this is possible to modify the contract during its term, but to avoid these substantial changes that would change the nature of the contract. So we will see that. So here, mentioning the contract performance, I have here Article 20 of Directive 2009/81 that indicates that special conditions could be laid down in the contract relating to the performance of the contract, provided that these are compatible with community law and are indicated in the contract documentation. So they have to be clearly, precisely established, unequivocally established in order to be able to use this. And of course, it has to be in the contract notice, in the contract documents, in all the supporting documents. And for example, here also in Directive 2014, in the traditional directive, Public Procurement Directive, we also see Article 17. This is a legal basis to use this type of contractual clauses, indicates that contracting authorities may lay down special conditions relating to the performance of a contract, provided that, and here we need to comply with that, provided that they are linked to the subject matter of the contract within the meaning of Article 67 and indicated in the call for competition. And these conditions may include innovation-related considerations, for example. So, okay, we have seen now like a background, the backdrop on procurement, the use of value engineering, and I want to bring you now to looking into a little bit of the history of value engineering to understand the nature of this technique and why this could be an advantage and how can we actually use it more often in our contracts. So this technique is originated in the US. We will see how it became from a trade secret, it became a game-changing systematic approach that is used at the moment in a mandatory way by all the federal agencies in the United States and is a part of provisions of the Federal Acquisition Act regulation. We will see how this also US experience was just to give you a little bit of taste of this, how this had an influence in Japan and how it had an influence also in the Netherlands. So I will give you some snapshots of examples. So, okay, let's look at it. Let's go to the definition of value engineering, and I'm using the definitions of the Federal Acquisition Regulation in the United States, but it is applicable for us as well. This definition as a systematic process of reviewing, analyzing the requirements, functions, and elements of the systems of a project, equipment, facilities, service, and supplies for achieving, and this is very important, essential functions at the lowest life cycle cost. And this should be consistent with the required levels of performance, reliability, quality of safety. This, as you see, is a systematic approach. is a systematic approach that is looking at the life cycle, and the idea is also to understand what are the functions needed. And we will see how this is related to the concept of value. So when we talk about value engineering, we also think about a multidisciplinary approach. A value engineering workshop is looking at the problem from different angles with different expertises, and it can be organized also in-house, but also with the help of experts. And now the other concept is value engineering change proposal. And what is a value engineering change proposal? And this relates to the value engineering clause. This is a proposal that the contractor submits consistent with the value engineering clause. So the value engineering clause must indicate what are the conditions and requirements to present such a proposal, what kind of modifications, and the comparison between the baseline, the actual contract, and the improvement that is going to be achieved. So through the change in the contract, this value engineering process, or this value engineering exercise, should lower the project's lifecycle cost to the government without impairing the essential functions and the characteristics of the performance of the solution. And this contract change requirement needs to be approved, of course, by the contracting authority. And it's possible to apply this to all types of contracts, including contracts with performance-based specifications. So here, let's talk a little bit about the origins of value engineering. And here I have a picture of Lawrence Miles. He was someone working at General Electric, and he developed the method of value engineering. And the first governmental agencies to apply the method, because initially this was a method of General Electric, and it was kind of a trade secret for them, developed during in the times of World War II, when there was a scarcity of materials, and they need to find different alternatives to the products that they had, or that they needed not the product, but the function of such a product, or such a tool, or such a material. So they had to look into that. But later, they started to think, if we want that suppliers also provide us with these things, we need to train the suppliers, and we need to train other agencies. So they started to work with the Navy. And so in 1957, the Navy's Bureau of Ships became the first Department of Defense organization to establish a formal value engineering program based on the work of General Electric. So they were basically training engineers, and they decided to train 1,000 engineers, 1,000 value engineering experts per year. And they did it like that. They started to train, like, let's say, big teams of people who could actually implement the value engineering. And this technique that was used by the Navy then later became a contractual requirement for the Armed Services Procurement Regulation. So this is the former Federal Acquisition Regulation. So already in 1959, they started using this as a contractual requirement. And later on, the value engineering that was initially with command approval became a mandatory program. So since 1962, the Defense Department's procurement regulations were modified to establish value engineering as a mandatory program, and is still going on today. So let's see. Here's I got for you. I'm not going to read all of this, but you can find it in a presentation. But it's a timeline of how value engineering has evolved through time. And interesting is to see all the US Congress hearings that reported the advantages, the improvements, and the benefits, and the savings obtained through the value engineering programs. So these past hearings through the Congress, the Senate, and this is how they incorporated into the regulatory system of the United States. So you can look into that. There are also, for example, in 2013, there was a circular that required that the agencies report on the value engineering, and later in 2017, they tried to give less burden on the reporting, but yeah, it's an established program that already provides savings, great savings on public contracts. So we're talking about value engineering, but let's define value. What does value mean? So here, this is from Miles Foundation. Value is to provide the required function. That means operational performance at the desired time with essential quality and reliability at a minimal total cost. So we're trying to reduce the total cost of ownership. And that is one of the things that the value engineering pros tackle. How are the contractors going to reduce the total cost of ownership? That could mean, for example, less work, but how do we share these savings? And here I have a little extract of let's say the publication of Lawrence Miles about value engineering, a really old one. That's the questions that should be asked. What do we need to have as a function? And here I have for you also some extracts of the Federal Acquisition Regulation, establishing the requirements of a value engineering change proposal. They have 8 points, so a description of the difference between the existing contract and the proposed requirement, the list of analysis of the requirements that might be changed, a detailed cost estimate and the reduction of the costs, an estimate of the cost the government may incur in implementing value engineering change proposals. So we also need to look into the contracts on how we calculate or estimate that the contractor performs value engineering as well. So that could be also important to include in the budget of a contract. The statement of the time by which the contract modification accepting value engineering should be included, and the identification of any previous submissions of value engineering. Just to give you an idea, in the US they have a mandatory approach, but also a voluntary approach. And what they do is in the voluntary approach, they say 50% of the savings with the contractor. So 50% for the contracting authority, 50% for the contractor, but also in the voluntary approach, in the mandatory approach, they share 25% of the savings with the contractor. So here, just for you to have as a background, it is very well regulated in the US, how value engineering takes place, the definition of all of the concepts. Also, they have already definition of the clauses that are used for supply or service contracts and to which type of contract that cannot be applied. So you can look into it. I'm not going to go too much in detail into that, just to give you a taste, as I said, a snapshot of examples. I'm going to share with you a little bit of the history of value engineering in Japan. So it was introduced in 1955. And how was it introduced? Through training again, through the purchasing agents of the US in Japan. So that they carry on seminars at various locations throughout Japan. And also in 1960, the Sano Institute of Business Administration introduced the value analysis planning course. So they started with a lot of training, a lot of dissemination, knowledge transfer of this methodology that had been really useful for the US. And there was also the Society of Japanese Value Engineering that was set in Japan, and they developed different guidance tools. And I've had here some references that you can look into that. But further to that, yeah, this is an example and all part of the guidance they published, where they see define which are the desired functions, and then which are the possible materials they can use, and which are the possible processing methods, and they score the different alternatives. So it's a method to validate different alternatives, to compare them, just as an example. But furthermore, looking at the history of Japan, I would like to mention that in 1963, the value engineering system approach was adopted by shipbuilders, by the railroad, by the heavy vehicle manufacturers, and by the electrical and communications machinery makers. And by 1964, the system extended to other basic machinery industries. And from 1965, it spread through the fabrication industries to process industries, then to metal, fiber, food, chemical industries, and later was taken by architectural construction companies. So it really moved into the different industries. And also, it was also reported effective in the research, development, and design stages, also for software development. So just again to give you this snapshot of the importance, in 1981, the director of the vice president of Fujitsu recognized that this method that they started to use came from the United States, and recognized this technology that actually improved the productivity, and the concepts of value analysis and value engineering were part already of their system of their industry. This is also interesting to mention that, well, there was an effort from the Japanese ministry to look into specific sectors to be developed, and that comprised the electronics industry, the computer industry, and yeah, that was significant because this kind of connects the use of these methods with the long-term vision of Japan in these industries that became important. So just to give you again a little taste, we moved from the 70s, 1950, 1960s, 70, 80, but now let's look into the 2015 in the Netherlands, when there was this committee in the Netherlands looking at the ICT projects in the Netherlands and evaluating what went wrong, what went well, and they see that there was a lot of problems in ICT projects. And they made some recommendations in this regard, and they thought that it was important to have incentives in all the contracts on ICT. Incentives, and one of them could be value engineering clause. It was also discussed that not only the value engineering clause is important, but the whole setup of having a trained personnel that can actually manage. You know, the contract management is very important to understand also how the budget is going to be used, how this is going to be monitored. So not just the value engineering clause is setting the conditions and setting the requirements, but then there is behind a whole setup of institutional management that is going to make it able to actually have a good result in applying and in following up the proposals made by contractors. So that's interesting. So also to give you a snapshot of a recent use of value engineering, I take the example of ProRail. The ProRail is a rail manager responsible for maintenance, renewal, expansion, and safety of the Dutch rail network. If you've been to the Netherlands, you probably been traveling with an S, but also through the rail network that is managed by ProRail. And they use value engineering as a decision-making tool in various projects. And they see that the use of value engineering is saving between 5 and 10% of the number of projects, and sometimes improvement up to the 18%. This technique, interesting to know, that was implemented in ProRail as a result of a PhD thesis that revealed the importance of this technique, and they have been using this in all the projects, and mostly they use this in the projects above 10 million euros. They apply value engineering in the concept preliminary design of the projects. So that's interesting to see. Again, let's go to see value and what is the equation of value, and this performance plus capability divided by the cost. The original formula is function divided by the cost, so we need to calculate that. We can say customer satisfaction divided by the resources. And basically what value management is concerned about is the creation of sustainable value, whether that is focused on a product, a process, a project, an organization, or in wider issues. And if we look into the directives, we see that directives talk about value of the procurement, value of the contract, the subject matter and the thresholds, and how to calculate the value, for example, using the life cycle of technique or the functional specifications, and how this can foster innovation. So all the new directives are looking forward to foster innovation and use the techniques available in order to do that, and value engineering can do that. In this morning, we also listen to the presenters talk about not only focusing on the price, but also thinking about the best quality ratio for the award of a contract. And then we need to know what is value for us. So what is the function, what is the performance and capability that we're looking for, and then understand what is this relation to the cost, and how can we increment that. So just to think about value a little bit, it can take many different forms. It can be, for example, exchange of value, use of value, esteem value, the open market price of an item. Sometimes value is used as synonymous of cost, but the most important thing is that the value lies in what the item brings to the project. Not what it is, but what it does. And we go back then to understand the functions. So value engineering is about delivering more of the right things for the less resources. So here, function is understood or defined as the measurement expressed in currency, effort, or exchange, and the cost is the price paid. In the cost effectiveness of value engineering is calculated like this. The percent of the cost is equal to the present cost and the cost after the improvement. And we could see from 30 to 70% from the projects of improvement, in some less, but this could reach that. And the benefits cost ratio, that is the annual net savings due to value engineering divided by the cost of operation of value engineering. So just to give a background, when you're talking about best value, we should think about the scope of our procurement, about the time, the schedule, and the cost, and then try to reach this balance in the middle. So how can we achieve best value? And thinking again, value engineering as a systematic process for achieving best value, value engineering as a multidisciplinary approach in nature and applicable to the function areas. We see that there are several methods of improving value, and that is by increasing the function of the product while keeping the same resources, maintaining the function of the product or service while reducing the desired resources or the required resources, increasing the function of the product or service while proportionately reducing the required resources, or increasing the function while increasing the resources to a lesser degree. Sometimes, for example, we can improve the functions by making an investment in certain technology. And of course, it could be an increase in the resources used, but if you look at in the long term, in the life cycle, we see that the investment in that technology could actually be could result in reducing the costs, but actually improving the functions. And like Lawrence Miles used to say, if you apply the method, you will always find ways to reduce the costs. It is the standard approach on that. So let's talk a little bit about the value engineering method itself, the method, how it was developed by Miles. And the method has three moments, three stages: the pre-study, the value engineering workshop, and the post-study. So in the pre-study, you need to coordinate who is going to participate, you need to gather data, the baseline, for example, of the services of the product, you need to select the right team, you need to model a business case, just so you have your business case prepared, and then you go into the more creative process of information, the functional analysis system techniques, that's the FAST methodology. You generate ideas, you do evaluation of alternatives, and go present the results of the workshop. And then you have the post-study, that is the value engineering study report, the implementation plan or the job plan, and the follow-up. So the method has some characteristics that need to be taken into account, and some insights in this regard are you have the focus on the function rather than the item. You have to avoid confusion from combining functions. You clear the definition of functions. The creativity is encouraged during the value engineering workshop. You have free the mind from configurations, reveal the unnecessary cost, and this is something very important. Reveal the unnecessary costs. You can start doing value engineering to those items or those services or products that are the highest costs. So you start to see which in a case, in a project, where are the highest costs? So let's value engineering those. For example, how is the time going? But I can tell you just a small example, a case in the United States. They needed to repair a building that was like a old heritage building, but they need to include some alarm system for the fire alarm. And when they received the budget to do that in the Congress, it was a huge budget. And they said, but this is impossible. We cannot go for this budget. Let's value engineering this proposal. And they started to value engineer, okay, where are the highest costs? And they found out that the highest cost was actually to make a hole in all of the rooms, to have the value engineering, the alarm system implemented, because this was an old house, and doing that will damage the house. And it was incredible the amount of money that would be invested only in making holes in the room. So I say, okay, these are the highest costs. How can we reduce that? Is it possible to put the alarm somewhere else? For example, in a closet? Does it somehow impair the functionality of it? No, it is possible. Okay, so we don't have to have the cats in the middle of the something as easy as that could be addressed by this method. So they decided to put the things, okay, 50% of the costs were reduced just by doing this analysis. And then they say, okay, how is the alarm built in? So they realized that the alarm was built in a way that the moment they have like smoke for a fire, this alarm would first go through the communications through a network and then go to the fire police or the firemen. So they say, okay, is it possible to have a direct connection from the alarm that's really just contacting directly the firemen? Okay, so they went to the producer of those systems and say, can you do that? And say, yes. And it was like really simple, and this reduced the cost again, a lot. So by doing this analysis, they actually came back with a project that was 70% less expensive than the original project. So this just to give you an idea of the possibilities that are that. And going to the last point, the insight is facilitate comparison. So you have a baseline and you will see what is the other possibility, and you compare the cost and performance. So that's very, very useful. So this is a summary of the method. So you have an information phase where you gather all the information that is available. So this can also be used, but not done by the contracting authority, but actually a method applied by the contractor. So the contractor, the requirement of the clause asks or requires the contractor to perform value engineering and to come periodically with value engineering change proposals. If you have, for example, a framework agreement of a contract that's going to be for 4 years or more years, for example, in the utilities, longer framework agreements, then you cannot be stuck with something, especially if the technologies are changing, if the services can be improved. So you have this window of innovation, asking the contractor to come up with the solutions because they know better, because they are the suppliers, they know the product, they know the service, and they can do it. So this is information phase, the functional analysis phase, where you see which are primary functions, which are secondary functions, how can these functions be achieved, are they necessary? Many times they are unnecessary costs, so you start to see, okay, this is not necessary. For products, for example, sometimes the packaging is very expensive. So yeah, can we change the packaging also to be more sustainable? So all of these things can be achieved like that. Then you go into the value cycle, that is creativity, evaluation, development with the multidisciplinary team. Then you have a presentation to the contracting authority. The contracting authority makes a decision. It's a go or no go. And if it's a go, then you have the implementation and the follow-up and the monitor. If it's a no-go, you go back to the value circle to see how can you improve. And from the monitoring perspective, I mentioned before, you started now with some key performance indicators defined. So you're going to very well define how are you going to monitor performance, what are your indicators. And based on these indicators, you have an assessment, perhaps a benchmark, and you see the performance of the supplier, and you evaluate the performance of the supplier, you start an improvement, you have an improvement proposal, and you implement the proposal, and you go back. So that's a virtuous cycle of setting your KPIs, monitoring the performance of the supplier, and requesting these proposals from the supplier to implement better changes in your contract. So before you were talking about standards, and I want to refer here to a standard. This is the value management standard. This is a European standard. I make a reference. This is also, I use the references of the NEN standard. It's from the Netherlands. And what does this standard basically have common language for the methodologies and description of the methodologies. So they see, okay, what is, for example, the fast technology, the functional analysis system technique. What are the steps on doing that? What is value engineering? What is the method? So just to have a common understanding on the method, on the concepts, and there's also the SAVE standard on the value engineering methodology. This is applied in the private sector, and this is originally the SAVE Foundation of the SAVE Society is originally coming from Lawrence Miles, that we've seen this picture before. And now that we have seen the context on innovation procurement, we have seen the history of value engineering, its applications, the method. Now let's see a little bit more into zooming in into the European legal framework. So looking into the public procurement directives, see why value engineering can help, like in a way, to this adaptive public procurement, because you can adapt and modify during the contract. And we look more into in detail the value engineering change proposals. And I have for you also some European case law if you are interested. So the legal framework, I'm not going to go a lot into this, but this is the constellation of the procurement directives. We have the directive on the public sector, the utilities directive, defense and security, concessions, the remedies directive regarding the challenges, but all of them, and in all of the procurement, we need to comply with the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, and those are the principles that I mentioned. Let's look now into Directive 2009, and this is the recital 12 that mentions specifically that the needs of the contracting authority entity should take into account the whole life cycle of the product, including the modernization, modification, maintenance. And here, very important, maintenance. It's important to think about maintenance in our contracts. And I have a very interesting example later for you about how value engineering can be used for maintenance. I have a specific case of the Royal Netherlands Navy. But so here, just to understand the importance of our procurement framework in Europe, that wants to look into the life cycle, and this is related to how we can also use value engineering. So here there is Article 1 of the Directive 2009/81. Defines life cycle as all the possible successive stages of a product, again, modernization, modification, maintenance. And when we think about value engineering, is how can we engineer more value? How can we engineer more this modernization and possible modification, maintenance? Okay. Here we've seen this legal basis, this legal basis for the value engineering clause. I have it again, so you just keep in mind the contract conditions for performance of a contract. So it's possible to lay down special conditions, and this could be a value engineering clause. This is for the Directive 2014/24. This has to be linked to the subject matter of the contract. I have already mentioned this. It could be innovation related. And here, also important to keep in mind as a legal basis for the implementation of value engineering clauses, those provisions related to the modification of contracts. This is something new. This is a complete section in the directives of 2014. And these directives translate the European case law on the modification of contracts, and it's possible to modify a contract during the term. And here, if you will look into Article 72(1) and A, it says where the modifications, irrespective of their monetary value, have been provided for in the initial procurement documents in clear, precise, and unequivocal review clauses, which may include price revision clauses or options. Such clauses I state the scope and nature of possible modifications or options. So this is a legal basis for the use of value engineering. What we need to avoid is that these modifications imply substantial changes, so material changes of the setting of the contract. And here a modification of the contract or a framework agreement is considered as substantial, and this comes from the European case law, when this basically change the balance of the contract, also if it introduces conditions which, had they been part of the initial procurement procedure, would have allowed for the admission of other candidates than those listed. Also, when the modification changes the economic balance of the contract or the framework agreement in favor of the contractor in a manner in which it was not provided for in the initial contract, or to, in any case, provide this setup initially and advertise it from the beginning, and where the modification extends the scope of the contract or framework agreement considerably. We have case law also on that, especially in concessions that have been extended, and that's a substantial change, or where the new contractor replaces the initial contractor, if it's, well, without complying with those cases already provided in the directives. That's possible if the specific circumstances are complied with. Okay, so to summarize, what are the prerequisites to apply a value engineering clause? So the intention to use value engineering needs to be advertised upfront in the contract notice. Actually, in the projects that we have, we are already exploring the possibility of using value engineering clauses since the market consultation. So we already, when we draft market consultation documents and the questionnaires, we already asked them, the suppliers or the potential suppliers, are you willing, would you be okay if a value engineering clause, and sometimes we have an extract of a possible value engineering clause being shared with, to get feedback. And in most cases, in the last years I've been conducting market consultations, we see that is a positive feedback from technology vendor suppliers on the use of value engineering clauses. And also the approach to value engineering should be in line with the European directives and the case law, and in particular with what concerns the modification of contracts and the limitations regarding the material of substantial changes of the contract that we have mentioned before. So here, just not to forget, quickly the principles that of the Treaty of the Functioning European Union that need to be complied with, transparency, equal treatment, non-discrimination. We have talked about this, so we'll pass it. And I have here some case law in case you want to look into the presentation, but we have, for example, some case law that is probably for you very familiar, the succhi di frutta, the other one of the Commercial versus France, that was, these are translated already into the directives. And these are some of the cases after the directives that also refer to modification of the contracts. But I'm not going to go into this. I just want to focus on one aspect that I find very interesting. And this is that we will, in our procurement, we need to understand better what are unnecessary costs. And what are some, let's say, problems that we find, that sometimes there's failure to examine the attributes which cause no useful function. So are we focusing on the real functions, or, yeah, we need to do this analysis. Are there attributes that are not real important? So there's a failure sometimes to examine specifications due to needlessly expensive materials or components. Also, unnecessary costs could be caused by poor buildability. So the failure to consider the construction implications. So the design, the moment of the design, we need to also understand whether this is really a good idea. The life cycle, and this is, I want to emphasize on that again. We've been repeating about the life cycle because it's very important, because sometimes there's a failure to consider the future operational costs, sometimes the cost of maintenance again. And the opportunity, sometimes there's a failure to consider the cost of losing potential revenue. So here I have a quote here from Delisola. It's an old quote, let's say, but it's still useful, is still relevant, and is that it is important to avoid confusing cost with value. If added cost does not improve quality or the ability to perform the necessary functions, the value is decreased. So this to highlight the relationship between cost, value, and function, summarizing that. So are there benefits of applying value engineering? Yes, because you can improve performance. You can eliminate unnecessary aspects, unnecessary costs. You can standardize or simplify operations, and you can improve the use of resources. Here, the value engineering clause. So what does a value engineering clause contain? You have the possibility to engineer your clause according to your needs, but basically you need to have a definition of value engineering. We use different clauses. In some of them, we define the value engineering of the sum of activities aiming to create value. So the contractor is required, has the obligation to create value during the contract. And in case of change orders or related to the value engineering change proposals, the contractors or the clause required the risk analysis, required to identify which contractual changes are needed, and the comparison with the total cost of the previous solution and the total cost of ownership of the proposal. Sometimes it's required the collaboration with other contractors and subcontractors, and it requires the presentation of the plan. How am I going with the time? I'm almost finished. Yeah. Oh, okay, so let's see. So, okay. So just let's go to just two cases very quickly. I just want to look into the case. This is the case of the Royal Navy. They wanted to outsource the maintenance of non-military vessels to specialized parties, and they wanted to included a value engineering clause. And the value engineering clause wanted that the contractor be smart or come up with smart solutions for the maintenance. So they define key performance indicators, and here I'm going to just to land a little bit with more concrete examples of what is a key performance indicator. So this contract was for 10 years, And they define an outline of the clause, they define KPIs, they have a setup for the organization and the implementation. But here, let's look into these, the KPIs. So they establish 4 very clear KPIs: the availability, the life cycle cost, the cooperation and flexibility, and the sustainability. And they develop a formula for each of these KPIs. But I am going to here share with you the life cycle cost formula that they develop. So here they designed what does it mean. You can look into that. But the idea is that the contractors come up with solutions. And one of the solutions is, for example, this anti-fouling system that allows for that the parts of the vessels are have a longer duration, and use the system for anti-fouling so that they change the original materials with new materials in order for maintenance to be easier to do. So you can dive into this in the presentation later. So they have a smart supplier coming up with solutions for the maintenance. They have other examples in addition to the anti-fouling, where the monitoring engines, other smart sensors in the vessels. So yeah, this was done through value engineering. The other example that I have for you is an example of the Waterschap Limburg. This is the water company that manages the wastewater in the province of Limburg. So they won the EAFIP award, the award from the European Commission in 2021, and they implemented a project on artificial intelligence for the water transport system. So they wanted to manage their assets, the asset management, to predict, for example, leakages, to integrate in the rainfall system, to predict all the working of the system in the control room. So they have this is just to get an idea, because they wanted to use data. So they developed a big data platform to use all the data that they had. And they decided to go to cloud and to have a digital twin of all the water system. And in order to do that, they had a tender with different lots and with a pre-commercial procurement, all tied to each other, because the results of the PCP feed the other lots of process automation, security, big data, and to maintain the whole system. So the pre-CP was on artificial models for the water transport system, and they had value engineering clauses to provide for value engineering change proposals, requiring that the contractors of the PCP and the contractors of the other lots cooperate to implement all the results of the PCP already into the ongoing contracts for the other lots. So that's very interesting, how you see the different lots, and in yellow, the PCP that was feeding into the other lots with the results. So here, the PCP, the results are integrated, and the idea is that they provide proposal that lowers the project's life cycle cost, improving performance. So this is the example of how they implemented it. They required the value engineering from all of the contractors. They collaborate with each other, and the VVL, the contracting authority, approves the value engineering change proposals or not. So here, these systems for BVL is already set up. So every time they have new procurement, they have these lots, and they have these value engineering clauses. It's like a role system in which they apply value engineering to all the results of research and development going into their contracts. And here, just to finalize, yes, and one last thing. So it's important to specify the outcome and the contract management system, to have incentives in the contract as performance conditions, to establish a baseline and measures, to have a top management commitment, because that's very important in a long-term relationship, and to establish how the money is going to, canalize, where the money will come from, also how the savings are going to be shared, etc. So for the value engineering clauses, the legal framework in Europe gives us flexibility to engineer our own value engineering clauses, so that we have, a value engineering clause that is compliant with the legal framework, and looking into the possibility of modification of the contract. And remember, the value engineering clause should be clear, concise, precise, I'm missing a P, and unequivocal. So, okay, to end up, will you apply value engineering clauses in your future contract? Yes, no, perhaps. I need more guidance on how to implement it. You can start voting. Okay, 100%. You can need more guidance, that's okay. Perhaps the toolkit can include a section on value engineering. Well, thank you so much. Here are some resources and some videos and thank you for your attention. Thank you.
If it magic is take just 2 minutes for some questions.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much, Ana Lucia, and thank you for this very detailed presentation on value engineering. And I think we applied the value engineering just to finish our conference in the afternoon because we just summarized everything. Thank you very much for that, Ana Lucia. I would have a question myself. I was wondering, how can we take into account those values that are not tangible? Do we neutralize them? Sometimes we do a process or just have a project in which we want to, for example, improve the image of an institution. And you cannot, sometimes you add value, cost to that. Does this method proposes something just to neutralize those kind of intangible value?
Yes, indeed. You can quantify that. You can make a system in which you quantify, for example, how security. It is a value in itself, but how do you measure that? Yeah. So you had to come, okay, how I'm going to measure that and include it in my formula. So it would depend on a case-by-case basis. Okay. Yeah, but you include that. You give a measurement to that. You give, for example, in a range, these are the things that I want to accomplish, and this one has a value of 4 or 5, and then you analyze that.
Great. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I'm going to see very quick if there are any questions on Slido. If I get to... I have one question. When is the best time to perform a value engineering analysis? At which stage of the public procurement process? Yeah,
the earlier, the better. You can have value engineering when you are the needs identification. But of course, we also see the possibility of the value engineering clause. So for example, you have a contract, the value engineering clause could establish that every year or every 2 years, depending on the contract, the contractor proposes a value engineering change proposal.
Thank you. And last,
yes.
Most of the value engineering examples that you have given to us are about mature technologies and optimizing well-established processes. What are your thoughts about applying value engineering to R and I, for example?
Okay, in the needs analysis, then, in the needs analysis, understanding better the functions that you want to accomplish and having this workshop.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Again.
Thank you.
So I think it is time to summarize what we have done in this first day of the annual conference. It is really interesting to know all your participation on different topics. We went from a general presentation of the procurement project, all our partners, and how we are building this network and community, to some more specific case studies on public procurement of PCP and PPI. Through a standardization and value engineering to some of these questions that you remain very active to the questions, and trust me again, we have noted all of the questions that we didn't give an answer to. I hope you had a nice conference today and you were not very tired at this point. I would like just to give the floor to Sylvia from Arte, who is giving us some housekeeping for tonight's dinner. And I would like to thank all people who are online, because we're going to maybe stop the conference for them, so you can, and you're not concerned about the housekeeping, of course, because you're not here. So thank you very much for people who are in line. We are going to stop the transmission for you, and then Sylvia, you can join us on stage just to give some logistic information on tonight. Thank you very much.